Welcome everyone to our live review for APUS History. If you're taking the APUS History exam, you are in the right place. I'm John from Marco Learning, and this study guide pack that we've got here is available for free. I've pinned it to the chat. I've put it in the description. And I like this study guide pack because it's as short as you can possibly make study guides. They're one page for each unit, and it's just that chance for you to look back and say, wait, what happened back with what's the Bill of Rights? You're going to realize as you look at the study pack that you actually know this. So this is a really exciting night. We've got Dan from History for Humans here with us. Dan, you are joining us from the sunny, great state of Hawaii. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Aloha, John, and aloha, students. I'm so happy to be here and to go do a mega review with you guys, get you feeling more confident and more ready to kick butt tomorrow. So yeah, I'm in Hawaii and yeah, super excited.
And I'm in New Jersey. Not as exciting. So everyone in the chat, if you like this stream, press that like button. Let us know where you're joining from. And throughout this session, we're going to be checking that chat to see what questions you all have. So Dan, I'm going to let you share your screen. I'm going to hang out with the chat and remind people that nobody is cooked. We're not doing this. Nope, not cooked at all. And also, we're going to finish. This stream will be a little bit less than an hour. And then Steve Heimler's going live on Heimler's History. And you can keep the APUSH prepping going there. So I'll jump into the chat and watch.
All right, what's up? What's up, everybody? I'm about to share my screen. If I know any of your teachers, because I reached out on social media, I think I saw someone mentioning Mr. Green. So if I know any of your teachers, just put your teacher's name in the chat. I'd love to see them and give them props. But let's get into this. Feel free to ask questions along the way. I will do my best to answer some of them. It's hard to both be presenting and answer all of them, but let's get into the shindig. All right, I hope you can see my screen. I'm going to make it full screen now. All right, so welcome. We have an hour together. I feel like I'm a good opening act for Heimler. So this is what we're going to be reviewing. This is the whole course. This is what you've been doing for the last 8 months or so, right? We started just a little bit before 1492 with the Native American indigenous populations, right? And then into the colonial era, you see up here. We learned about the American Revolution, the early American history with the critical period, the early presidents, antebellum, the Jacksonian democracy, Civil War. We're going to be covering all of this all the way up until, the end of the Cold War in period 9. Now, one of the most important things you can do to prepare yourself as you're cramming tonight and getting ready is to not just try to memorize all the terms, okay? You want to have an idea of the big developments of this course, okay? Because if you can place, I like to think of the individual terms, all the vocab terms, the events, the concepts, the ideas, the people as like little puzzle pieces. And all of US history and APUS history is this one big puzzle. Where does that piece fit in? What is it next to? What part of the story is it telling? Because that'll help you think more historically about what you're studying so that you see the bigger picture. That's what you want to do. All right. So if you look here, and actually I'll share this slideshow with you guys in just a minute when I unshare my screen, and I'll put it in the chat for you. These are the most important years for this course. Now, I promise you, tomorrow, after your multiple choice, when you get to the FRQs, you're going to see these dates on the FRQs. You'll see some of these dates in the multiple choice as well. But for the essay questions, you're going to see these dates. Okay, they're going to ask you about either economic development or foreign policies or political parties or women's roles or African Americans' roles between 1800 and 1848 or between 1860 and 1877. And if you know the big development, if you know what was the big things happening in the country at that time, you're just going to be so relieved because you'll understand what you can include in your essay. Okay, so I always tell my students, I've been teaching this course for, so a little more about me. I've been teaching this course for like 12 years now, okay? And my students generally do really well on the test. I always tell them these years, you don't want to kind of sort of know. You really want to have these down, okay? So you can, take a screenshot of this and practice later. I've been plugging this on social media because it is so important, okay? Because these years are tide turning years. Okay. It marked a big shift in some big thing happening in the country. Okay. So I'll review the answers. I have them on the next slide in a second, but if you, as I'm talking, can you figure out what year corresponds to what big development? Okay. Because again, if you know this, all those little terms become a little more clear because you can place them in the story. Okay. So 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? So if you ever see the year 1492, what it's signifying here, I'm going to go to the answers now. If you ever see the year 1492, if you look down at A on the bottom here, towards the bottom, it signifies that the Europeans have arrived. Okay. That Columbus and the Spanish are starting to colonize and the Columbian exchange begins. So if you ever see the year 1491, you might see that on like a short answer question potentially. And it's going to signify the Americas before the Europeans. So you know, oh, they're just asking about what were some indigenous cultures like before the Europeans, and particularly the Spanish, arrived. If they ask you about Native Americans, there's a good chance they're going to ask you about how they adapted to the environment, right? So you might know, and if you know just a few of the tribes, like the Iroquois in the Northeast, with the three sister farming and the long houses, right? So if you know of that, okay, if you know the Pueblos in the Southwest, irrigation, massive irrigation projects because it was dry, so they had to adapt to the dry environment, be able to have agriculture, okay, that will help. And then of course the Great Plains, the Sioux or the Lakota, you can talk about how they were hunter-gatherers. And then once the horse got there, they became masters on the horse. But the horse, remember, the horse wasn't there until after the Spanish got there. Okay. Now, if you ever see a question between 1492 and 1607, it's saying what was going on with colonization before the English really got in the game. All right. Because 1607, if we look where B is, this is Jamestown. And Jamestown, yes, it's important because it's one of the colonies, right? That will become Virginia. But it's also important because it was the start of English colonization of North America. It signified this big shift that all of a sudden the English, right? So after Jamestown, then New England, right? And then the other 13s will, over the course of 150 years, the other 13 colonies will form. All right. So got to know that. And then that whole period is colonial development, right? Some things about colonial development that you should know is that they were forming some measure of democracy in the colonies. So make sure you're paying attention to that with like town hall meetings in New England, okay? With, the Virginia Charter for those going to Jamestown, how it granted them the rights of Englishmen. The Zenger trial, guaranteeing some free speech or setting an early precedent for free speech and freedom of the press, particularly. Okay, the House of Burgesses. Where was the House of Burgesses? Oh, that was in Virginia. That was Jamestown. The first mini parliaments in North America. And what is this setting what precedent is this setting? That the colonists, particularly the white male colonists especially, have political rights, some measure of political rights. Of course, it was mostly the ones with property at first, but just knowing this early development of democracy and then or republicanism and this feeling that they have rights that just need to be protected. Okay. Moving along, 1763. You got to know this year because it ends the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War starts in 1754. It ends in 1763. Why do we care so much about the end of the 7 Years' War? Is it that war particularly was important? It kicks the French out of North America. So England kind of is now dominating North America. But really for the sake, like for this course, the big thing you need to know about 1763 is it moves us towards the revolution. This year marks the increase of tensions between the colonists and Great Britain. The end of salutary neglect, the start of the taxes, Sugar Act, Stamp Act, all that. Okay, so if you ever see 1763, you know the relationship between the colonies and Great Britain is starting to shift. I'm gonna move a little faster so I can see some of your questions in a second. Okay, but I just wanna go over this because this right here, guys, is a summary of the whole course. 1776, you're Americans, you should know this. That's when the Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence, right? Remember, the Revolutionary War started earlier, but at first they weren't declaring independence. That's why they sent over the Olive Branch petition. Hey, give us back our rights. And we'll go back to being hunky-dory again. But of course, the Olive Branch petition was rejected. Okay. And then, tensions continue to rise. The wars continue to be fought. Common sense is written. And then we declare independence. All of a sudden, the Revolutionary War becomes pretty much revolutionary, about independence. Okay. 1787 is the Constitution. What did we have before the Constitution? Drafted during the Revolutionary War was the Articles of Confederation. Trying to remember a few of the major problems with the Articles of Confederation. Can you think of some? In the chat, you can type them in. What were some problems with the Articles of Confederation that they were going to scrap them and then need this constitutional convention, which they'll meet in Philadelphia, of course, and they'll hash out this document that's a framework for government that's a whole bunch of compromises. Big ones was not having the ability to tax. Okay, there wasn't even a president, so there was no executive. Okay, they couldn't regulate trade between the different states, right? And then the big thing that sparks the Constitutional Convention was Shays' Rebellion and this fear of mobocracy, this fear of kind of too much democracy, people having too much power and the state being too weak to really handle it. They wanted a stronger federal government. So that's what we see with the Constitution. Okay. And then, of course, like the Federalist Papers, if you're Hamilton fans out there, they write the Federalist Papers in order to convince either anti-federalists or people who are neutral, not undecided on if they should support this new constitution or not, particularly in the state of New York, because that might sway other states, whatever New York did. Okay, so 1787, if you ever see that year, it's like Constitution. Okay, right after that, of course, we have the first, Washington coming in, and then Adams. Okay, 1800, that's Jefferson, the Revolution of 1800. We're going to start seeing democracy spread a little bit more like the Federalists were in power. They were kind of strengthening and centralizing power more. Jefferson was trying to kind of give more power to the average person, and we'll see that extended during Jacksonian democracy. But after 1800, particularly after the War of 1812, remember, we fight Great Britain again. That was on the DBQ last year that some people really messed up. We're in like the antebellum period, right? And then 1848 is a year you just got to know, that shows up on the test all the time. It's the end of the Mexican-American War, and it signifies, with this Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, it signifies the road to the Civil War. Tensions were already kind of increasing between North and South, but really it's exacerbated by 1848 in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Okay, so if you ever see like years like 1840 to 1860, it's probably relating to the tensions leading to the Civil War. 1860 is when Lincoln is elected. From what political party was Lincoln? You can type it in the chat if you remember, because the Whigs, the Federalists are gone. The Democratic Republicans have kind of morphed into the Democrats, and then the Whigs emerged, right? But then the Whigs are gone. Lincoln comes in as a Republican, and the Republican Party was against the spread of slavery. They were not abolitionists. Keep that in mind. Not abolitionists. But they don't want it to spread. There's a difference. Kind of like you might make a connection between the containment policy during the Civil War. We're not going to go to war to get rid of communism in the Soviet Union and their satellite states, but we're going to try to prevent it from spreading. Okay, that's what the Republican Party's platform was on slavery. But the southern states, starting with South Carolina particularly, they saw this as almost an existential threat. They kind of this a little bit like really defending of their rights as slave owners, ironically, of course, excuse me. They pretty much interpreted the Republicans as abolitionists, okay? And South Carolina secedes, 6 other states follow, and then we'll have the Civil War. So 1860 is Lincoln's election, secession, and then 1861, the war starts. The war ends in 1865, the Union prevails, hooray, a new birth of freedom, kind of, sort of, not really, but that's when Reconstruction starts. Okay. Reconstruction tries to like reunite the nation while supporting the newly the slaves who just had won the freedmen who just won, just earned freedom, kind of, sort of, right? So we see stuff like the Freedmen's Bureau, eventually the 14th, 15th Amendment. But of course, the southern states are going to pass black codes and a lot of measures to keep them disenfranchised and to keep them in a subservient state. Okay. Then 1877, Reconstruction ends. Jim Crow's in place. I'm going to move a little faster to get to your questions. 1898. Why is that year important? Okay. If we see it right here, K, that's the Spanish-American War and start of U.S. imperialism. Okay. We're going to have some activities in just a minute. So 1898, if you ever see a question about foreign policy, Spanish-American War, we annex Hawaii. That's where I am right now. Okay. Then we also see, right after that, Theodore Roosevelt, the Roosevelt corollary, the big stick policy. 1901 kind of sort of signifies when the progressive era starts. So remember what was happening before that, the Gilded Age, all that corruption, a lot of problems for workers, laissez-faire. Then in 1901, the progressive era really kickstarts when Roosevelt comes into office, busting trusts, right? Regulating the meat industry after those muckrakers. Okay. 1929, what happens? A big thing. The stock market crashes, start of the Great Depression. Okay. Also during this time, US foreign policy, we're neutral. We're kind of isolationists. We want to avoid, we reject the League of Nations after World War I. We're trying to take care of ourselves, not getting involved in foreign conflicts. Okay. And then we're in the Great Depression. And then we really don't care about what's going on in the other parts of the world, right? Very looking down, looking inward. Okay. And then tensions are rising in Europe and Asia with, the fascist powers. Okay. We're declaring those neutrality acts. 1941 is Pearl Harbor. All of a sudden, World War II, we're in it. World War II will end in 1945. The Allies win again. America's instrumental in that victory again. And then 1945, it ends World War II, but it also starts the Cold War and this U.S. Foreign policy of being this world power, exerting the containment policy across the world, trying to prevent the spread of communism. And then 1991 is the end of the Cold War officially when the Soviet Union dissolves, even though we're kind of sort of in a new Cold War now. All right, but I'm going to stop sharing and see what kind of questions we have. And I'm sorry, that was a little longer than I thought, but let's see if I have any questions and I can try to answer them. Let's see. The first one I see, how can I memorize dates faster? I don't know. I would just have flashcards, or just, if you have that screenshot, just practice and just, quiz your friends, quiz each other. Okay. Because those dates, you don't have to memorize too many dates, but those ones you want to know, because that's the big ones that are tide turning events. Okay. Detente. So I have Diane. What's up, Diane? Diane's asking what's detente and what's SALT. Okay. So this is during the Cold War. So this puzzle piece, we would place this puzzle piece. I'm going to share again. Let's see. And I'm going to go. Am I sharing? I don't see my screen. Why am I not seeing my screen? I am not seeing. One second, y'all.
And if you put the link in our Zoom chat,
sure. I can, yeah, let me do that now. I think I have it copied. Oh, in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, because then I can share it for everyone.
Oh, I think I was sharing I have multiple videos, multiple screen tabs open. Okay, chat. There you go, John. Okay, so John will be able to share the link, and it has lots of little other practices. We're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I don't know why I'm not able to share the screen that I had before. Let's see if this works this time. Nope, it's not working.
I can share it for you, but would you like me to share this to the chat?
Yeah, please. Okay, but let me go back to that question that Diane had. The detente was during the Cold War. It represents a cooling of relations, because even though we never fought the Soviets directly in the Cold War, okay, we're in period 8 right now, it got heated, right? We didn't know that there wasn't going to be a World War III. We didn't know there wasn't going to be a nuclear confrontation with with atomic bombs being thrown back and forth. And after the Cuban Missile Crisis and how close it got, Kennedy realized, hey, we better cool things off. That was a close call. He works with Khrushchev in the Soviet Union, and they agree to some things, including the SALT I, which is to, oh no, I'm sorry, not SALT I. He agrees to some test ban treaties, basically detente, cooling of relations. It starts with Kennedy. He's the first one to really bring in a detente with Khrushchev. And they signed some like test ban treaties of like how they would test nuclear weapons. Then SALT I is under Nixon. Again, things were rising, getting heated with Nixon, kind of more of a hardline like Republican in office. And he works again to cool relations, bring in another detente. And one of them was with the SALT agreement. All it did was just, the main thing you have to know is that it tried to cool relations by limiting nuclear testing. Okay. Slow down the arms race a little more. And then there's a SALT II under Carter, very similar, but so yeah, those are what SALT is. Okay. Detente Eisenhower, well, he had massive retaliation there. So he had a pretty hard line approach to dealing with the Soviets. So I got to figure out why I'm not able to share my screen here and try to do that. Where is...
And while you're doing that, Dan, I'm just going to come on and say hi, everyone. It's John from Marco Learning. I've been in the chat. You guys have been a great group, cooking up a storm in the chat with great answers. This gives me a lot of confidence about how smart this audience is and how ready you all are. While you're figuring that out, Dan, I do want to just take a quick little commercial break and talk about the rubrics for this year's exam. And Dan, you're also welcome to rejoin the Zoom if you'd like, and we can sort of just figure that out. Couple quick reminders. A lot of you know this now. There's been a lot of posts about this, but the DBQs and LEQs have changed for this year for AP US History, Euro, and World. Instead of needing to use 6 documents to get all the full points, you can get away with using just 4 this year. We still recommend you use more. By using more, you have a shot actually at the complexity point, the way that's written. You have a shot at, sourcing more documents, doing the hip and happy kind of game. You can get more points and move up the food chain, but you're not required to use 6 anymore to get the points. For the sourcing, the hip thing where you look at the purpose and you look at the author and all of this, you only have to do that for 2 of the documents. If you aim for 4, you're again putting yourself in contention for that quote unquote unicorn point. But it's something to really note here. This was kind of a surprise for a lot of us in September 2023 when the College Board launched this set of changes. What this means for you all, everyone, and we put this on our Instagram page at Marco Learning. What this means is that if you're looking at last year's tests or tests from 2021, or you're looking at scoring guidelines or books, or even videos from Marco Learning and things that Dan has put on History for Humans, and it was done before September 2023, it might be out of date because of this set of changes. So we're keeping up with that. And then finally, they made that complexity point, which used to be so hard and sort of weird to get, a lot easier if you go for more of the documents, if you source more of the documents, if you kind of go above and beyond on the DBQ, you have a shot at earning that point. So this little quick carousel is just a friendly reminder for you all, as you're studying tonight and hopefully not cramming and hopefully not learning this for the first time, that there have been these changes to all of the points. In fact, Dan, I'll let you kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Yes.
If you guys have questions, let us know.
Are you guys seeing my screen now? Because for some reason I wasn't seeing it before.
Looks perfect.
Okay, so let me go, here's something to reassure you, because I see some of you guys are obviously the content, you're answering each other's questions. And some of you guys are saying I'm cooked, but here's the thing. You guys are going to do the cooking. You're going to cook the LEQ. You're going to cook the multiple choice and all your FRQs. Look, this should reassure you. Just like what John was saying, they've lowered the bar a little to make it and been more flexible with how you can earn the points. Do you know that you can score a 5 out of 6, which is higher than 90% of the country, with just 2 pieces of evidence to support your thesis for the LEQ? Just 2 pieces of evidence. So long as you can explain what they are. Right, here's the analysis. So first you just explain the evidence. That's 1 point for 2 pieces. Always better to do 3 in a third paragraph, right? A new topic for a third paragraph. But if you only can think of 2, you can still score really well. You just have to be able to analyze it. So you explain it, then you analyze it, and then you want to demonstrate the historical thinking skill. Show how much changed. Why did some things change and some things not change? How can you, like, why was this such a big cause of like the economic boom of the 1950s and 60s? Or why was this a minor cause of why America got involved in World War II? Whatever it is, that's the other point. If you can do that for 2 pieces of evidence and you get 3 choices, guys, it's going to give you 3 choices. One will be an early, from maybe colonial or up to like the Revolutionary War. One will be like antebellum to somewhere around the Civil War Reconstruction. And one's going to be, you know, period 6, 7, or 8. It might have a little bit of 9 in there, but it won't be fully on 9. And you have 3 choices. All you got to know is 2 pieces of specific evidence to support a thesis on that. And then you just got to make sure you get your context. We're going to practice that in a second. Get your thesis. Almost everyone gets that, so long as you provide one line of reasoning in your thesis. Okay. The complexity, I'm going to go over in a little bit, but it's more important. This is the thing. A lot of students mess up because they're trying to do way too much. And it also causes them to not be able to think clearly, because they're a little more frantic. My students, you know, I've taught this for 12 years. My students, I realized this, that one of the big challenges of the test is not knowing the history or knowing how to get the points. It's having a strategy so that you can calmly do it, so you can think more clearly. All right. Now for the DBQ, there are 4 points that I'm telling you, even if you don't have a great grasp of all the history, you can do well. The context. I've graded the DBQ for the last 2 years in Tampa. And sometimes they gave the context for 1 good sentence. You want to have at least 2, I say 3 to 4 for the context, just in case it's a little too vague or something, or it's a little off. You have some, you know, icing on the cake, so to speak. The context, you don't even have to use a document for that. Just like what led to this prompt? What was happening in America before this? Okay. You don't have to use a single document. You get that point. You got that in the bag. Thesis. It's 1 to 2 sentences. That's it. And it's a single point. Guys, the complexity point, even though they've made it a little easier this year, it's still pretty challenging. So you want to make sure you grab these 4 easy points and still score better than like 80% of the country. Generally, that's how 4 points would generally be, like 85% of the country gets 4 points. The top 85, 4 or more. Thesis, just at least 1 line of reasoning to answer the question. You want to have 2 to 3. Okay. Summing up the documents. Here's something for you. Don't quote the documents. Don't quote them. Explain it. Sum it up. Just your own words. If you are feeling an urge to put something in quotes, just summarize what the quote said. The people grading your essay are going to just bypass your quotes because they have the documents. They want you to be thinking and explaining what is going on in the document. If you do that for 3 documents, almost everyone gets that point, so long as they're trying and not quoting. So then you got a 3rd point just from 3 documents. Of course, you want to do 4 or 5 just to be icing on the cake. And then 1 piece of outside evidence. Don't forget the outside evidence. This is 1 to 2 sentences to earn a point. Just 1 thing that's not related to any of the other documents, and you can get that point. If you do these 4 easier ones, you will be much better off than the average student on this test. Before even worrying about the harder points, we're going to practice HIP and we're going to practice arguing with documents in a little bit. Okay. And when we do that, I'll go over how to get the complexity point. So let's practice, y'all. Okay. Now this is a very good analysis sentence stem. I've been sharing this on social media today. The people that generally earn the analysis point, like argues with the documents point, and for the LEQ, the analysis point, they use a sentence stem that is very similar to this. It doesn't have to be this, but this is just one way you could do it. X demonstrates that blank. And then you're just going to input prompt words. That slavery was a major cause of the Civil War because, and then you explain it. This is right here is where you have to actually show your thinking. The other parts are kind of done for you. X would be a term, a vocab word, a concept, the subject of a document. Let's look at some examples below. The Great Migration demonstrates that internal migrations were caused by economic factors. You should be able to tell what the prompt was, to what extent, or evaluate the extent, or sorry, this one would probably be evaluate the relative importance of the causes of internal migrations in the, between 1900 and 1940, something like that. The Great Migration, there might be a document on that, or maybe this is the LEQ and this is one of your pieces of evidence. The Great Migration demonstrates that internal migrations were caused by economic factors because, and then you explain it, many Blacks moved north, could have said, moved seeking jobs in war industries up north, period. This right here is ensuring that you're summing up the evidence and tying it back to the thesis. I always call it the so what sentence. Why are you talking about the Great Migration in relation to this prompt? Because the Great Migration shows it was economic factors that were causing the migrations because they were moving for jobs. Of course, you could also say, yeah, they also were moving up to escape for social reasons, to escape Jim Crow oppression in the South. You could say that too, for greater rights and opportunities up north. You could say that too. Or the cotton gin demonstrates a significant change in slavery in America because it made cotton more profitable, which made the South more dependent on the use of slave labor. If you can do this for 4 of your documents, a sentence stem very similar to this. Yes, it's a boring essay. I know. You're not trying to win a Nobel Prize in history here, guys. What are you trying to do? Scoop up points. You could do this on your essay cues after you explain your piece of evidence and explain what it is. This is how you tie it back. Maybe you've been practicing the T formula, or maybe even practicing the ACE formula for SAQs. This ensures that you're tying back the evidence and showing why it's relevant. You do this for each of the documents you reference, at least 4, okay? And then your LEQ, you're gonna do this for 2 or 3 pieces of evidence, 4 if you can. If you can do this for 4 pieces of evidence on the LEQ, you can actually get the complexity point this year. All right, so let's do a little practice right now. Context. I want you to determine which of these 3, and you can type it in the chat, would get the context point. Remember, the context is the first part of your essay. In your introduction, it sets up the essay. You have to jump back in time and bring us to the prompt. So always read the prompt. I tell my students 3 times. Evaluate the relative importance of causes. That means like how important were the different causes of internal migrations within the US in the period of 1900 to 1970. What were the relative importance of causes for internal migrations? Within your essay, you would use the word, this was a major cause of internal migrations. This was a more minor cause of internal migrations, and then why? You would use that part of the prompt in your analysis part, right? Over and over and over again. Now, but which ones earn the context points? I'll be quiet. I'll let you read over each of them. And you decide A, yes or no, B, yes or no, C, yes or no. You don't have to explain why. You can just look at it. And we have about 20 more minutes together, guys. So I'll go over the answers in 1 minute. I have the answers on the next slide here. These are... All right, let me go over the answers now. Now, the ones that don't get the point, this is common mistakes that students make. Number 1, yes, it gets the point because it jumped back. It lets the reader know where people were living. Why is that important? Because the essay is going to say where they moved to, right? The B here does not earn the point. It jumps back in time because the Gilded Age was before this, but talking about the Civil War and talking about there was major transformations, it doesn't necessarily relate to this topic. You have to identify what is the subject of this essay. The subject is internal migrations. So you'd have to talk either about where people were moving before or where they lived before, right? So let's look at the last one here. C would earn the point because it's saying industrialization took off and people were moving to the cities. Why does that matter? Because you're just saying where people were moving before this essay so that you're setting the context for where they're going to move now. Okay. Like in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson starts off with the context. Like in the Constitution, they start off with the context. It's like, what does the reader need to know to understand what's going on? All right, let's do, and keep in mind the context, guys. Some of you guys are worried about the complexity point, and that's fine if you're trying to get a 5 on the test and you're trying to get a 7 on the DBQ and a 6 on the LEQ. The context point is worth the same amount as the complexity point. So make sure you get this point before you worry about the one that's way harder and you have to do a lot more for. Here's the thesis point. Which one earns the thesis and which two do not? Can you think about why they don't? Let's look at the prompt. Evaluate the extent, how much? A lot, a little, somewhat, to which transatlantic voyages, movements across the Atlantic, exploration, trading and that sort of thing, affected the Americas between 1492 and 1607. Evaluate the extent to which the voyages across the Atlantic affected the Americas between 1492 and 1607. Oh, look at those years. Oh yeah, we just reviewed those. Good thing. So we're practicing the thesis now. You got to give at least one answer to that prompt. I'll give you guys about a minute, 90 seconds or so to answer, to look at A, B, and C, which one earns the points, which ones don't. So you can say A, yes, B, no, C, yes, or you figure it out. Type it in the chat when you think you know. I just want to see some of the chat. I hope this is helping because I just want you to be confident you can grab these points. Money in the bag. Okay, some people think A and C, some people say C. Oops. I guess some of you saw, I by mistake, I showed the answer. So here it is. A does not. I would say probably 5% of students do something very similar to A. You cannot just say economic, social, and political changes, or there were economic, social, and political causes of this. That's too vague. It's almost just saying there was causes. You have to be specific. It led to this changing, it led to this changing, and this changing, okay? B does not get it. Why? Again, it's too vague. Look what it says. Due to the amount of changes that Indian tribes and European nations experienced. You're just basically saying, yes, it was really affected. The Americas were really affected because of all the change. You need something specific. C gets it. Okay. What does it say? Two things. It led to European colonization and the Columbian exchange. Now, if you have that, do you know what your two body paragraphs are going to be? Yes. One is going to be on European colonization. You can talk about the Spanish. You can talk about the conquistadors. You can talk about them. You can talk about maybe Pope's rebellion and them fighting back. Okay. And then you're going to have another paragraph on the Columbian exchange. You're going to talk about diseases. You're going to talk about goods moving back and forth, the food goods, right? Now, imagine you all of a sudden, as you were writing, you remembered another change. Okay. And you're like, oh, Christianity spread to the New World. Or imagine you, let's see, you remembered that there's going to be some alliances between Native American cultures and the European cultures to fight against other Native American cultures, right? If you remember a third category, but you only included two in your thesis, that's okay. You could go back and add it if you have space in your thesis. Oh, and this. You can do that. Or if your thesis is already good and you feel like you got that point, just write your third paragraph right then and there. All right. Now, I hope this helped. Don't do what A does, because some students do it. Don't do what B does, being too vague. Do what C does. At least a couple specific categories to answer the prompt, a couple lines of reasoning. You only need one. 3 is good. 3 is best. 2 is A-okay. All right, let's look at the next. Let's look at how to HIP. The good thing about HIP, guys, this year, so this is only 1 point, right? Because you don't HIP on the LEQ. It's 1 point to HIP 2 documents. However, oh, I have some balloons coming up around me. You can actually earn a 2nd point if you HIP 4 documents. So I think this year it's not going to be a unicorn point anymore. I think the unicorn is going bye-bye. I think students are going to be bagging the complexity point. And I think this is the easiest way, because it's easier to HIP 4 documents than to argue with 6 of them. So let's look at the example on the top. Oh, and there's a couple tips on the top. When you go to HIP, I would label which part of HIP you're going after. So if you did the context, if you wrote the context of the document, I would just put in parentheses, context, and underline it. Why? To show the reader that's what you're going for. You still have to do it correctly, and the reader is going to be looking for it either way, but it just makes it a little easier for the person reading your essay to make sure you get the points. That's all you're trying to do. Make sure they're seeing what points you're going after. So label it, and you only need to do one. You only need to provide one part of HIP. However, audience and purpose go so well together. I always tell my students to just include them together. Okay, let's look at an example. The Declaration of Sentiments was written in order to secure the right to vote and equal rights for women in America. Purpose, that's the purpose, right? By showing that, because you can't just identify it, you have to show the significance of it. By showing that for America to represent the spirit of liberty, women also needed rights. This demonstrates that, blah, 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 blah. And then what are you doing? Then you're arguing with it as well to try to make sure you're also getting the analysis point. So I want you guys to practice in the chat. Imagine you're using Washington's farewell address. Washington's farewell address was hoping to convince the American people, who at the time were dividing into parties, audience, and it's actually also context, but he's trying to convince the American people, audience, that political parties were harmful and dangerous. And he wrote it in order to blank. What's the purpose? Why does he tell them about that political parties are dangerous? Why does he do that? By showing that. And I'll show you the answers that I have in a moment, but try to do your best to put it in the chat. And let me look to see how you guys are doing. Oops. Let's see. Unicorn is just they just call the complexity point the unicorn because it's so hard to get. It's like a unicorn. It doesn't really exist. You never really see it. This year, it's going to be easier. It's not a... So I'd love to see in the chat. I love that you guys are giving each other love and asking questions. That's great. But I'd love to see you guys try to HIP this to see if you can get the point. I got some of Mr. Green's students in here. Make sure you tell my boy, Mr. Green, my roommate in Kansas City, what's up, that Mr. Lewis says hi, and that I'm glad you're here. So cool. Okay, shout out to Mr. Green, yeah. And his name is John Green, just like Crash Course. So how classic is that? Except he does have an E on his name. All right, let's look at how to do this. Oh, and look on the bottom too. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written from the point of view of a radical patriot, the POV, was written blank. Add the purpose or the audience. By showing that, let's look. This is how you HIP. If you can do this for 2 documents, you got another point. If you do it for 4, but you're going to try to do it for 5, you can get the complexity point. Washington's farewell address was hoping to convince the American people, who at the time were dividing into parties, audience, that parties were harmful and dangerous in order to try to keep the nation unified and strong by showing that factions could lead to civil war, period. If you're trying to HIP a political cartoon, you could say, by showing that, and then describe something in the cartoon. by showing that the British people seem really cruel when they're taxing the Americans. If it's a propaganda poster, describe what's going on in the cartoon and how that's, or sorry, in the poster, and how that's demonstrating what they're trying to do with the document. Okay. And then lastly, Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written from the POV of a radical patriot. And you can use the term POV. They know you're under the clock, right? They know you're pressured. So you can do a little shorthand. Was written to convince neutral Americans to support independence by showing that. Use that sentence frame over and over for at least 2, but hopefully 3 or 4, maybe even 5 if you have the time. If you don't have the time for the complexity point because you're struggling, that's okay. If you can get the other points, gosh, you'll be doing so well. The average score on the DBQ the last several years has been a 2.7, not even 3 points. So if you can get those 4 easy points, you're well ahead of the game. Now, this year, I think the scores are going to be a little higher. So you're going to want to try to get that hit point. You're going to want to try to get that argument point, right? With the sentence frame that I showed you. All right. So let's see. Do we want to do some presidential? Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just, we have time for one more activity. Okay.
And real quick, I just wanted to say hello to everyone in the chat. I'm getting a bunch of great questions. I'm John from Marco Learning. If you like this video, press that like button. Shout out to Mr. Green and all the teachers who are here with some of their students. Dan, I think we do have time for one more activity. Everyone, we're going to wrap in about 10 minutes and then send you over to to get your brain cows milked.
Yes.
And that's the Heimler. That's what happens to you apparently on that channel. So Dan, I'm going to let you wrap up with our last activity. If you've got questions, let us know. Also at the end, Dan, we have to leave time for Marco to appear live in the flesh and in the fur. So definitely give me some more likes on this video and give me some little sheep emojis if you want to see Marco. But I'm going to let you do your president's activity in our last 10 minutes or so here.
Awesome. Super cool. And again, make sure you do check out Marco Learning's free study guide that's available. It's pinned at the top. Okay. They got a lot of great other stuff on their website as well for not just APUSH, other AP courses as well. So thank you, John. And yeah, shout out to Mr. Early. Was it Mr. Early? Was that the name, that best teacher ever? And Mr. Riordan. But anyway, let's do one last activity to get you all ready to crush, to cook tomorrow. Remember, we're doing the cooking in here. Okay. Well, okay, I'm not seeing my screen again, so I'm going to stop. Why is this not?
It was sharing.
Oh, it was. For some reason, I'm not seeing it, which is weird.
Maybe it was the slideshow mode.
Okay. Is it? It's okay. Now
it's visible now.
So why don't you try to, knowing something else that really helps is not just studying all the terms, but being able to match, okay? Take things out of context and try to put them back in, because the test is not it's not all in order, right? It's not gonna be oh, this was something happening during Washington's presidency, and this was happening during Lincoln. All right, so take a minute and just look over these. See if you can match it. World War I, who was president at that time? Right, because you might get a question about this president, and knowing World War I was happening will help. Era of good feelings, you gotta know that. Who's era of good feelings? Okay, I'll just give you guys another moment to try to do some quick matching, and then I'm gonna review so that we can close up, get Marco on here. Excited to see Marco in the fur. And then get you guys ready for Heimler's brain milking marathon. All right. So I'm going to go over answers here. So here they are. And again, studying these can help prepare you tonight instead of just going randomly, how do I study? Matching will help. So let's look at some answers. Washington. Oh, well, I'll just do start on the right side. World War I is Wilson, right? He was elected to keep us out of war, but then because of the Lusitania and more German submarine warfare and the Zimmerman note, we enter. Okay. So that's the big thing happening under Wilson's second term. Okay. Era of good feelings. This was when there was the political parties, the Federalists died out. This was under Monroe. Okay, so you got to know the era of good feelings is Monroe. There wasn't two political parties. We were all feeling like, yay, we're living up to what Washington said. We're all good Americans. Okay. And then, of course, the Whigs will come about protesting Jackson. Neutrality Act. When did we declare neutrality? Actually, we declared it. Washington was the first, right? When France is saying, hey, America, we need your help. Remember how we helped you after Saratoga? So Washington signed the first Neutrality Act. But then in the 1930s, when FDR was president, Congress passed a series of neutrality acts to make sure we weren't going to get involved with the belligerents, the rising tensions in Europe and the Pacific. Okay. So it also helps, guys, when you're studying, look for continuities over time, look for connections over time. Where else was there a neutrality act? Okay. Louisiana Purchase, you got to know that that's Jefferson, and you got to know that that also represented this kind of more of a Hamiltonian vision. He did something that was loose construction, right? But it like doubled the size of the country, or maybe even more, right? Hard to pass up. The Square Deal, you got to know this. This is part of Theodore Roosevelt's, don't confuse the Roosevelts, Theodore Roosevelt's progressive platform, okay? The era of the common man, that is Jackson, okay? Common white man, of course, there's an asterisk, right? But it was a pretty revolutionary thing that even the poorer folks, the poor white men, could vote at this time, okay? There was a question there. This was on the DBQ last year. So this era of the common man, that's Jacksonian democracy. Okay. Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny was going on for a while, but it really is tied to Polk's presidency, and it'll lead to the Mexican-American War. Okay. Civil War, maybe you heard of it, kind of this big thing that happened in the middle of the 19th century, is under Lincoln, right? He was elected Republican, South Carolina secedes, Civil War starts. You've heard of that, I think. Spanish-American War, this is under McKinley. Okay, this is the start of U.S. overseas expansion. Okay, Spanish-American War. Also, I'm in Hawaii. There's a McKinley High School down the street. He was the one who annexed Hawaii as well. I can't believe there's not actually more people protesting it, but that's another story. Alien and Sedition Acts. This is under Adams' administration. We're almost at war with France. Congress passes it. He signs it. It like makes it, you can't criticize the United States. Oh, but you know what? I might not be able to finish everything because we're trying to wrap up. Let me go quick. Sedition and Espionage Acts. Again, they limited free speech during World War I. So this is Wilson. He signs this. The spoil system, that's under Jackson, is kind of corrupt, but we're also going to see a lot of spoil system during the Gilded Age as well. Firing workers who aren't from your party, hiring workers who are. Okay. War of 1812, that's Madison. Got to know that. It leads to this spirit of nationalism because we kind of like have a draw against the British, but we kind of defended our own. Okay. Declared Europe to stay away from the Americas. I'll end here. You got to know that. You got to know that the Monroe Doctrine told Europeans, hey, stay out. And that's a doctrine that influences the rest of U.S. history. It's still referenced today. I don't have time to do all the others, but you can practice on your own. You have this slideshow. I hope it helps. Thank you guys so much for being here. You guys are awesome. You guys are going to do the cooking tomorrow. Okay, let's turn it back over to John.
Great. So all the people who are cooking here, let's cook up a little Marco. And in fact, actually, this is a special surprise just for the AP US. There's about 1,000 people in the room right now. For the 1,000 of you, there's two Marcos. There's Marco and his kid sister, Nina. And very rarely, Dan, do people get to see both of them. So I want to see little fluffy sheeps and clouds in the chat. Take a seat, Nina. And we're going to get them to do a little like, just hello from the two of them. We'll cook them up. And Marco is like the unicorn of AP US history himself, the unicorn point. And he also wants to remind you all, you are not cooked. You will be doing the cooking. And so Dan, he's been saying hi on all of these streams, giving a little blessing, giving a little wave to everyone. Awesome. So if you've liked this stream, press that like button. I'm going to go live tomorrow with Marco on our YouTube, on our Instagram after party. So check out in our description of our video, the study guide packs we've got. Smash that like button for this video. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Head over to Heimler's History for his review, last peek at Marco. And I'm going to be going live in just a couple minutes for AP European History.
John, could I put something in the chat for you to share? Can I share my like my Instagram and TikTok handle for
Yes.
these guys?
In fact, it's history. Okay, let's do this. It's history for humans. Everyone, you
Yeah.
can follow history for humans. Put that in the chat there on Instagram. You've also got a YouTube channel and TikTok.
Yes. Yep. And I have a ton of really good, very specific, very quick tips for the AP exam for you guys tomorrow. So check me out. I have more stuff going on TikTok right now, but some on Instagram as well. And tell your teacher to follow me as well. And
Great. Well,
Marco Learning too, definitely.
great. Well, we've only got the dog. We don't have these great tips. So check out History for Humans, AP US History teachers and students. We thank you so much for joining. Good luck tomorrow. Cook up that AP exam and don't get